Hi, my name is Ben Weiss, and I'm the instructor for this new class, Timber Frame Design in Fusion 360, given at Yestamoro Design Build School. In this video, we will go over creating a master component for a timber frame, which will include a post plan, a general mass model, and kind of the outline for the first bent. So let's get started. I'm going to begin by reviewing this SketchUp model of a Dutch barn. I've taught SketchUp at Yestamoro for a number of years, and it was and still is a great tool for timber frame design, but Fusion 360 has a number of advantages, and so I thought it would be a good exercise to see how difficult or easy it would be to create this frame in Fusion 360. So, quick review of this completed model. This is a Dutch barn, as I said before. Basically, it has 4 bents. Within each bent, it has 4 posts, and on top of each of the 4 posts is a plate running the full length of the building. The dimension of this frame, the width is 28 feet, and the length is 41 feet 8 inches. You might think that's kind of a strange length. I started with 42 feet, and then I wanted rafter spacing even throughout the entire building. So I had rafters on 3-foot centers, and then with the rafter being 4 inches, that last rafter overhangs the end of the building by 4 inches. So if you take 42 feet and subtract 4 inches from it, you get 41 feet 8 inches. So that's the length of the building. So as far as size of timbers, all of the posts are 8 by 8. All of the beams and plates are 8 by 8, with the exception of this big center tie beam, which is 8 by 12 in height. Let's see, the braces are 4 by 6s, and the rafters are 4 by 8. And then these joists are 6 by 6. So it's kind of a nice design in that you can have a second story in the barn if you want in this center aisle. You can also have these lofted platforms for storage. So in Fusion 360, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my account icon here and go down to Preferences. And generally, if you just start up, you probably start up on this screen here in Preferences. So I'm going to go down to Unit and Value Display, and I've already got it set up properly here, but you will probably be in decimal format for this foot and inch display. So if you change that to architectural, then we will get feet and inches in our dimensions. So I'm going to hit Apply and do an OK. Okay, so this is our browser tree here, and this is going to show us everything that's going on in the model, components and sketches and bodies, etc. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually save the file. You see that this top level component is unnamed. If I save the file first, what happens is that Fusion will do its automatic backup. So it's always a good idea to first off save this. And I'm going to call this Dutch Barn. And I'm going to put a 4 on here because I've been practicing. So I have a few different Dutch Barn files. So this is going to be Dutch Barn 4. Okay, so now you see that this top level component got named with our file name. Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do is create a new component. Your toolbar may look a little bit different. You may have over in Assemble a new component here. Let me show you real quick. If you want to reconfigure your toolbar, basically pull down the menu that has all of these, settings or features for this section, and you can add by going to this 3-button menu and pin it to the toolbar. So I like to have new component as the very first thing, kind of reminding me that I really want to put everything in a component. So this little button shows the current active component. Since we've only got one, that one is always going to be active. But now I'm going to create a new component underneath our top level component, and I'm going to call this master. Now, one of the things I like to do is I do all caps on whenever I create a component or a sketch, and then I can distinguish that very quickly from the stuff that gets automatically created by Fusion. So now we're in a master component. It got activated automatically. So if I open up its tree, we can see all it has is an origin here. So I'm going to create a sketch. And where I want to put this sketch is pretty important. I want to put this basically on the ground right here. So I'm going to hover over this plane and click. And Fusion automatically navigates to looking straight at that sketch. So from above, we're looking straight down at it. So we are in a sketch, which is, an environment for creating essentially 2D drawings that get extruded into 3D. You can tell that you're in a sketch because you've got a little check mark here, finish sketch. You've also got a sketch palette dialog box. And you'll see that the tools change along the top to give you sketch tools instead of solid tools. So I'm going to go up to create, and I'm going to pick rectangle, center rectangle. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. I want to start at the origin, and I'll go into a little bit later why I did that, but it's basically allows you to do a lot of mirroring very simply if you start at the origin. So I'm going to click here at the origin and release the mouse button and then just start moving. And we know that we have a 41-foot 8-inch building. So you see the dimension on the left is highlighted. So I'm going to type in 41 foot 8 inches and then hit the tab key. Now if I zoom out, you can see the other dimension. So I'm going to hit tab. Where'd it go? It's down here. Okay. And I'm going to put in 28 feet there and then press enter. So this is the beginning of our first sketch. And you can see we have our dimensions here. Dimensions can be moved. So all I'm doing is holding down the mouse button and moving this dimension around. It's not changing anything in the sketch. And you can see we have a black rectangle here. And we also have these two cross lines that get generated when you do this center point rectangle. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a post in this corner. So I'm going to go back up to my create menu. This time I can get this 2-point rectangle. So I can either get it out of this create menu, 2-point, or I can click on it here, or I've also got this particular thing. You see how there's an R right here in the menu? This is set up by default as a shortcut key. So I can simply press R to get into rectangle. And I'm going to start in this corner, and you see how you get a little blue box here? That's showing that it is intersecting this corner. So this is going to be, this rectangle that we're about to draw is going to be coincident with the corner of this larger rectangle. So once I get the blue box, I'm going to move in the direction I want to go, and then I've got 2 dimensions here. I'm going to type in 8, hit the tab key, and 8 again, and hit enter. So now I've created this little 8x8 rectangle. I can change the dimensions around. All right, so that's our corner post there. Next, I'm going to create a second post that's inward. I'm going to press R for rectangle. And now you can see as I move along this baseline, I get an X, a blue X. That's showing that if I draw this rectangle right now, it's going to be coincident with this line. So I'm going to click, and then I'm just going to move in one direction and type in 8, tab, 8, enter. So another 8 by 8 rectangle. But this one looks a little bit different. I'll clean up the dimensions here first. But you see how there's two blue lines here? So blue lines versus black lines. Blue lines indicate that this is not fully constrained. This rectangle, if I double click on here and I try to move it, I can't. This rectangle I can move because it has some blue geometry. It also has some black geometry. So basically, we've created something that's coincident with this this baseline, and I can't move it off the baseline, but I can move it left or right along the baseline. That's actually very convenient for us because we want to establish the dimension inward of this post. So all I'm going to do is press D for dimension, and then I'm going to click on this line here and click on this line here, and then oops, there it is. And so now when I move downward, I have a dimension. If I click again, I can change that dimension. So that is actually 8 feet. So I type in 8 feet, press enter, and now you can see that rectangle is all black. It's fully constrained. It's not moving, or it can't be moved. So I'm still in the dimension tool here, so I'm going to hit escape and try to move this, any of this geometry. I can't move it. So that's what you want. You want your sketch geometry to eventually be fully constrained. Okay, so we've got two posts essentially in our post plan. Now, we know that the other side of the building is symmetrical with this building. So I could draw a few more rectangles, but you know, in a complicated drawing, you want to do as much mirroring as possible. It's going to save you a lot of time and save you a lot of potential problems, potential mistakes. So I'm going to go up to the mirror command, and now we get a new dialog box. And these dialog boxes are basically showing you whatever's in blue is what you're doing currently. You know, I can click here. Now, I would be selecting a mirror line if I do that, but since that blue started off in objects, basically Fusion is saying go ahead and pick all the objects that you want to mirror, and then when you're done, you would click down here and say, okay, now Fusion's asking you what's the line to mirror about. So if I go to objects, I can double click on this first rectangle that we drew, and then double click on this second. I don't have to hold down Shift to add to selection when you're in a dialog box. So that's a little bit odd, but a nice feature. Since you're selecting objects, no Shift is required. Okay, so I've got these two post outlines, these two rectangles selected, and now I want to select the mirror line. Okay, so I'm going to go to select, and if I try to, this is the line I want to mirror about. If I try to select that, you see I can't. But remember how we set up that initial sketch in the middle of the building. I'm just holding down my Shift key and kind of orbiting up here. If I go turn on my origin, now I have a plane that I can hover over, this particular plane right here, and click on that. And now you're going to see a preview. We haven't mirrored yet, but Fusion's showing you a preview of what you're going to get if you click OK. And that looks good to me. So I'm going to click OK. And now let's use the view cube here. I'm going to click on the top of the view cube. And now we're looking straight down on our sketch again. So even though a sketch is essentially 2D, there are 3D sketches, but that's kind of an advanced feature. So even though sketches are essentially 2D, you can still look at them in 3D. And if your screen is looking a little bit different from mine, your camera settings are probably set up a little bit differently. So I clicked on this little icon here, went to camera. Actually, I'm going to change it. I'm going to go to perspective with ortho faces. So now when I'm looking straight at something, that's ortho. There's no perspective here. But if I orbit up, I do get some perspective. So I kind of like that display. Camera setting. Okay, so we've got 4 of our posts essentially located in our frame, and before that we did the overall dimensions of our frame. And now, these 4 posts in the bent are going to get reproduced within this frame, in this same sketch. And I know that these 4 posts, I know that the 4 bents are evenly spaced in this frame. So because of that, I'm going to use this rectangular pattern feature. So if I click in here, I get a new dialog box. And again, the first thing is in blue, so that's what I'm working on currently. And it's saying, go ahead and select all the objects that you want to make a rectangular pattern out of. Well, these are the 4 objects, these 4 rectangles. And by the way, we are seeing quite a bit of information in this sketch. We're seeing these constraints. We're seeing that things have been mirrored. This is actually showing that this geometry is mirrored over here, this little symbol. If that's too busy for you, you can go to the sketch palette and you can turn off your constraints, and you can also turn off your dimensions. So now we have a much simpler drawing here. And actually, I'm going to click on this line and delete it, and this line and delete it. So now we have a very, very simple drawing. Okay. And sometimes it doesn't get all these dimensions for some reason. So if I click on here twice, now I got rid of all the dimensions. Okay. So now I am ready to go back in and do my rectangular pattern. So I'm going up here to my toolbar. If it's not in your toolbar, pull this down and go to rectangular pattern. And again, if you want that on your toolbar, come over here, click on that and pin it to toolbar. Okay. So rectangular pattern is what we want. So I'm going to click on that. And this dialog box is saying, go ahead and select everything that you want to make a pattern out of. So I'm double clicking on all of the 4 rectangles that are composing the bent essentially. So I've got 4 rectangles selected. So I'm done. It says 16 selections. I think that's all of the 4 lines within all of the 4 rectangles. So that's the 16 objects that got selected. The direction that I want to make the pattern in is this line right here. So first I have to click here to activate my direction selection, and then click on this line. Okay. Then distribution, our choices are, do you want to specify the spacing between this pattern, or do you want to do the overall extent, the length of the pattern? I want extent. And I want, overall, we want 4 bents, including the one that's selected. So I'm going to switch this to 4. And now you see, as I start dragging this out, you'll see that we've got 3 more copies, a total of 4 of these 4 rectangles. So as I move this arrow, you can see that this distance is changing. And this distance, let's put in the length of our building, which was 41 foot 8 inches. And now you can see that it's actually gone 8 inches too far. So I'm going to modify that and just say 41 inches. Okay. So now we should have 4 evenly spaced bents that have all of the 4 posts in it. Now you can see there's extra information in this. You can do a rectangular pattern in multiple directions. We're not going to do that. So I'm going to click OK. And now if we click on our top view, and actually I'm going to turn off the origin over here in our browser. Okay, so now we essentially have our post plan. But before we finish the sketch, I'm going to hit the I key, which is inspect, which is a way to measure. So I want to confirm that I've done stuff right. So I'm going to click on this edge of the post and this edge right here, and we have 8 feet, which is correct. Then I'm going to go over to inspect and hit this restart selection button. And I'm going to pick this edge, and that's 12 feet from outside to outside of those two posts. So that's good. Now another way to get a dimension is just click on something, and down in the lower right corner of the screen here you'll see 41 foot 8 inches for the length of our building. And oops, I'm going to close this measurement dialog box. If I click here in the lower right corner, I see that that's 28 feet. Okay, so we are done with our first sketch. So I can either click here to finish the sketch or click here. And now let me zoom out with my mouse wheel. So I'm going to go over and open up the sketches folder, and here is our sketch. I can prove to you that that's the sketch by changing the visibility. So basically we're turning it on and off here. Okay, so since we're going to do a few sketches in this same folder, I want to name them. Fusion is automatically going to name them sketch 1, sketch 2, sketch 3, etc. So this is a little weird. When you want to rename something, you don't double click on it. If I double click on it, I'm editing the sketch again. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to finish the sketch. So what you have to do to rename is click, wait a second, and click again. Then you can rename it. So I'm going to call this post plan. And again, my style is to do all caps so that I can distinguish what I named versus what Fusion named. But there is our first sketch. The next thing I'm going to do is create a sketch to do a mass model of the barn. So basically the outer perimeter of the barn. So I'm still in my master component. That's the active component. Whenever you create a sketch, it automatically gets created inside the master component. So you want to get into the habit of looking at what your current component is before you create a sketch. Okay, so I'm going to hit the Create Sketch button. And now the first thing when you create a sketch, you've got to select the plane that you want to create that sketch on. Conveniently, we have this origin that pops up, and I want to create it right in the middle of the building here. So I'm going to click on that plane, and Fusion automatically navigated so we're looking straight at that plane. So if I tip things up here a little bit by holding down Shift and my mouse wheel, you can see I can look at it in a perspective manner, but I've got this grid here. Now, if you want to go back to the straight on view, you can come over here in your sketch palette and hit Look At. And the reason you want to do that is you can snap to these points here and here, which are actually where this line intersects this plane. If you tip it up like this, you can't snap to that. So this is projection, which we'll get into a little bit later, but you're getting automatic projection when you look at this sketch straight on. So that's essential for us drawing on this sketch if we want to snap to our existing perimeter of the building. So I'm going to go to my 2-point rectangle. I'm going to make sure that I'm intersecting the outside of the building here, and I also want to intersect here. So you can see on the bottom dimension on the screen I'm getting 28 feet, which is the width of our building, and as I go up you can see that the vertical dimension is changing. So I'm going to type in the proper vertical dimension, our wall height, which is 12 feet, and press enter. Okay, now if I navigate, you can see that I've got essentially a cross section of the building without the roof on it. And our sketch here is totally constrained, except for this side here can be moved in and out. So to fix that, to totally constrain that, we want to put a dimension on either this top or bottom line. So I'll press D, I'll click on this line. I'm getting an angular dimension here, so I'm going to press escape. Let me try that again. D for dimension, click here, go straight up, and now I want to put in our building width, which is 28 feet. Okay, so now when we look at this sketch, everything is black in the sketch. And there are two sketches going here. This is the post plan. We are not editing that right now, but we can see it. We are editing on this sketch plane right here. Okay, so now we want to establish our roof pitch, which is a 12-12, which is easy. It's a 45-degree angle. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to hide the constraints so we can see what's going on a little bit better. And I'm also going to hide the dimensions. Okay, so if I go up and I pick line or press L for line, either one, I'm going to hover over the top of this rectangle, and you can see I get an X, but as I go right to the middle, I also get an X with a delta or a triangle on it. That's showing the absolute center of that line, and that's where I want to be. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to move upward. This dimension really doesn't matter. I just want to move upward enough, but I want to be at a 90-degree angle, which you can see in the second dimension there. And I'm just going to click here and click the checkbox. Now, if I was to show our constraints, you're going to see on this line, well, we're not. I thought we would see a horizontal and vertical constraint, which is this bar here. Well, anyway. All right, so we have a black line here. I'm going to click on this, and I can go to this line type and click, and you see it turns into a dashed line. That's called a construction line. Another way of doing that is if the line is selected, I can just press X on my keyboard, which is the shortcut key for construction geometry. So construction geometry is different than real geometry in that, you see, if you have real geometry and it's closed, a closed profile, Fusion's going to select it and then we can extrude. Construction geometry is different in that Fusion excludes it from a closed profile, which is handy. In this case, you'll see why in a second. Okay, so I'm going to get another line, so I'm going to press L, and I'm going to intersect here, and now we're going to do essentially the roof pitch. So knowing that this is a 45-degree angle, if I hit Tab to go to my second dimension here, I can type in 45, and you see a little lock that appears to the right. So we have locked that in. I tab back to my original dimension, and now I can't change that angle, but I can change the length of the line. And I want that line to intersect the construction line, the vertical line that we just drew. So I'm going to click there. Okay, so now I want to do the other side. So I'm still in the line tool. I can click here and click there very quickly, and I get my finished roof. So now I want to explain better the construction geometry. So I'm going to hit Escape to get out of my line tool. And now you can see as I hover over these two objects, I've got two different closed profiles. If I come here and hit X, you can see I have three closed profiles. So I really don't want, when we extrude this building, I don't want to have to select three different profiles to do it. So that's why this is construction geometry. By the same token, I can now click on this line and press X, and that's construction geometry. And now I have a single profile to select when we extrude the building. Okay, so we're actually done with this sketch. We have enough to make this mass model. So I'm going to finish the sketch. Actually, this time I'll click up here. Okay, so looking over in our browser, in the sketches folder, we have two sketches, our post plan. If I hide that, you can see what it is, and the sketch that we just created. Now you see this blue line is still left behind even though I hid the sketch. It's because it was selected. So if I click outside of it, that goes away. So now as I toggle this on and off, you get the sketch. Okay, so I'm going to rename this sketch to mass for mass model. So I'm going to click on it, wait a second, click a second time, and then type in mass. So that's our sketch to generate a mass model. Okay, so we're going to do our first extrusion here. So we're going to go up to the extrude button. You can also press E as a shortcut. And now if I hover over a profile, I can actually start moving it in a direction and getting a three-dimensional body out of that. But in this case, I don't want to go in a single direction. I want to go in multiple directions. So let me kill that selection. And first, let's look at this dialog box. And you can see there's a type of extrusion. We're not going to use thin extrude. So make sure you're just in a regular extrude. Then it's saying, okay, go ahead and select the profiles you want to extrude. So if I hover over this profile and click, that is now selected. And it shows one selected in the dialog box. Now this is saying, do you want to start at the profile plane, the profile you just selected? There are other things you can do here. You can do an offset, for instance, but we're just going to use the profile plane. The direction we do want to change. Right now it defaulted to a one-sided direction. I want to do a symmetric. So now as I pull this arrow, you can see I'm getting both sides of the building pulled out at once. Okay. Now, extent type, distance is fine. Measurement, we have two measurements. One, we could put in half the length. So, from the center, how far did we extrude out? Or we can do the total length of this symmetrical extrusion, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go out, and we know our building distance is 41 foot 8 inches. Now, here's an important thing. You can get a plus or a minus on the extrusion distance based on what Fusion just kind of randomly thought the direction I want to extrude in. So if there's a minus sign here, you've got to respect that and leave that there when you change the distance. So my distance is minus 41 foot 8 inches. And you can see down here, operation, we are creating a new body. So I'm going to click there. Okay. So now if we open up the bodies folder, we have a single body in there. And if I hide it, we can see our sketches. So let's go ahead and hide all of our sketches, and we can see we've got our first solid body. So that is the perimeter of the building. Now, in this case, I don't want this to be some solid color. I want to actually see through it. So we can do different appearances here. We could make this a metal or different species of woods, or but there's also an air, which is essentially looking straight through it, an air setting. So I'm going to go to modify and go to appearance. I usually just use A, but just to show you where it is in the menus. This is our appearance dialog, and these are the different appearances that we have currently in the model. And so I'm going to go down here to library and type in air and press enter. And let's see if we can find an air material. Oh, here it is down here. Okay, so I had to scroll the dialog box down to see it. So this is an air texture essentially. I can drag it onto the model, or I can actually drag it onto the body over here. I could actually drag it onto the component, and then every body that we make inside here would be this air, but I'm just going to drag it onto the body. So now you can see, we can see right through that. It's essentially still a solid 3D model, but it's transparent. So I'm going to close this. There's our first body. So we want to do one more sketch, and that is the sketch to do an outline of our bent. So I'm going to go up to Create Sketch. First, I want to see what my current component is, and it's the master model, or the master component. I'm going to create a sketch. Now this time I want to create on the outside of our building on this face right here. So I can click there, and that's where our sketch is created. But I'm going to do a Control-Z to undo that and just show you something that I've got in the habit of doing, because sometimes if you have a face selected by mistake, or just leave it selected and then go to Create Sketch, the Create Sketch is going to use the current selected sketch. So if we go back to the front of the building here, I'm going to pre-select a face. So before I do a Create Sketch, I click on here, that's where I want my sketch to be, then I'm going to create a sketch. So I kind of like that. It's you know, it's a little bit more apparent what you're getting than selecting the sketch after you do the Create Sketch command. Okay, so you know what? I've actually created two sketches here. So I'm going to undo and look at my browser until I'm just doing undo until that sketch goes away. Okay, so I want to pre-select the face that I want to create my sketch on, go to Create Sketch, and now we are in the sketch environment. Again, we can tell by the toolbar and by this Finish Sketch check mark and by our Sketch Palette dialog box. Okay, now we are going to lay out our bent. So one thing we've got is we've got a plate that we're looking at, you know, straight on the cross section of, essentially, and we're going to draw that first. So I'm going to press R for rect. I'm going to intersect the corner of the building, come out here, and then type in 8, tab 8, enter. So that's our 8x8 cross section of our top plate. Now I'm going to press R and start down in this corner and come up and intersect that plate. And so that is our post. Okay, so that was easy enough to locate. Now there's another post in here, and if I tip this up, you can see, why not use this sketch right here to create our post. So I'm going to show you how to project, and I'm going to show you when you need to project and when you don't. If I look straight at this sketch, by look at, you can kind of see that I can see that post and I can snap to it, that outline, the rectangle, you know, the profile of the post in the post plan. Now if I tip up a little bit and I try to do the same thing, I'm not getting an intersection right there. So if you want to work straight on, you don't need to do this, but if you want to work kind of in 3 dimensions doing your sketch, sometimes you're going to need to project geometry. So I'm going to hit P for project, and I think that's in the create. Yeah, it's right here, P for project. I just use it so often that I know the shortcut key. So I'm going to press P for project. I get this project dialog box coming up here. And if I double click like that on this rectangle, I am projecting the portions of that rectangle that intersect the plane that our sketch is on. So I really didn't need to do that. All I really needed to do was get this line. Well, actually, I do want those two lines because that's going to establish these 2 points that I want to intersect with. Okay, so I'm done with the projection. You can either double click on that rectangle or click on these two lines and this line. But most importantly, we want those intersection points projected. So if I click OK, now you can see those are they're projected into the sketch that we're in. So if I want to work in 3D here, I can press R for rect, and I can click here, and I can also get a snap to that other side. So I'm coming up with this outline of the post, and I don't really know how far to go here. So I'm just going to arbitrarily go there, and I've got something that's 8 wide, but I didn't specifically say 8. So I'm going to do D for dimension, and I'm going to click on our two lines and then make it 8. So you can see everything's black here except for the top here. So if I hit escape to get out of my dimension tool, I can move this post up and down, which is good. That's what I want to be able to do. Another thing, I want to put the profile of a plate on top of it. So I'm going to go to my rectangle tool. I'm going to click here in this corner and click here in that corner and then come up. So we've got 8 as one dimension. I'll hit tab and get 8 as the other dimension. And you can see that this is now blue here. So I'm going to add a dimension here. All right. So now we've got 2 black sides and 2 blue sides to that rectangle. So I hit escape to get out of dimension, and I can move the whole thing up and down. You see the plate and the post is moving at the same time because we intersected the two, and they're going to stay intersected with a constraint. So what we need to do is to establish the top of this plate, which will determine, the height of the post as well. So I'm going to look straight at this sketch, zoom out a little bit here, and let's go ahead and draw a rafter in, and then we can kind of see where this post should be, how much it should cut into that rafter for the bird's mouth. So I'm going to go get my line tool, and I'm just going to make an arbitrary line that's basically, I know that it's too long. And I'm not going to try to get this at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to show you a better way to do that. So I'm purposely off 45 degrees, and I'm going to click and hit escape. Now I'm going to use our constraints here for the first time. So what I'm going to do is do a parallel constraint, which is this one right here. So if I click on that, the first line I click on stays where it's at. The second line I click on becomes parallel to that first line. And you can see now this blue line's at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of my constraint. And now the depth of this rafter is 8 inches. So I'm going to press D for dimension, click here, and click again, and type in my 8 inches. Okay. So you see that line went black, so we established exactly where it should be. Okay. So we now have kind of a profile of the rafter, but we've got some extra stuff here. So I'm going to use the trim tool, which is in this modify menu, but I've got it on my toolbar. So I'm going to trim that excess off and this excess, and then zoom in here, that one and that one. Okay, so now you can see that we've actually got a bird's mouth cut in this rafter profile. And if we go up to the top, everything's fine up there. And you can see that's a constraint. That's showing that these two lines are parallel to each other. Okay, so now the exercise is how far up do we want to go with this post and plate to cut into this rafter. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of the tool I was in, and then move this up. And you can see you don't want to be there. You'd be cutting too far into the rafter. All right. But you don't want to be here either because you're not supporting the rafter. So somewhere around here is where we want to be. And we probably want it on an inch value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dimension this rectangle, or one of these lines in the post rectangle. So I'll press D, and I'll click on that line. Oops, that didn't work, so I'll hit escape. D, click on the line, and let me try it one more time. D, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to finalize this dimension. This is showing what it is currently. So 18.7 and 29/64. Obviously, we don't want that. Let's see if we go 18 foot 8 inches, what that looks like. And that looks pretty good to me. Now, you can try something different. You can always go to these dimensions and double click on them and change them. So if I typed in 18 foot 10 inches, you can see that's cutting in to too much of the rafter. So I'm going to double click on that and go back to 18 foot 8 inches. That's not a whole lot of bird's mouth, but I think that, gives you more strength to your rafter. Okay. So we have established the height of this post, and we've also established the plate that sits on top of the post. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to work on our tie beams. And we have a tie between these two posts. So I'm going to go get my rectangle tool, and I want to intersect with this line and this line. I'm going to turn off the show of our constraints, and that way we can see what's going on a little bit easier. So back to rectangle. Make sure you intersect here and intersect here. And then this is an 8x8 timber, so I'm going to type in 8 here and then enter. Now, you can see that's blue, so the easiest way to kind of constrain something is to move it around. And you can see it's partially constrained. I can only move it vertically. For instance, if I was to draw a rectangle out here in space, and I move this, I can move this in any direction. It has no constraints on it. Okay, let me undo out of that. But this is only going to move vertically because we snapped it to this line and this line. So that's good. That's exactly what we want. Now I'm going to hit D for dimension and go from this top line to our floor, and we know that that's 10 foot 8 inches, so I'll type that in. So that's established our tie beam here. And you can see it's all black, it's all constrained. With the exception of that blue line right there. I'm not sure if that's an artifact or what, but I guess if we had to get rid of that, we could do a dimension from here to here. It's saying 7'4". Now, this is interesting. This is saying over-constrained sketch. Do you want to create a driven dimension? Sometimes you want to see a dimension there, but basically what this dialog is saying is this dimension isn't going to change anything. This is just showing the dimension that already exists. So I'm going to press cancel. I'm not sure why that's blue. I think it's just really an artifact that's going to go away. Okay, so we have our outer tie beam established, and our two posts, our two plates on this side of the building, and our rafter up here. So let's just mirror all that to the other side, and we don't have to redraw that. Again, I'm going to hide dimensions to make it a little simpler. Let's look straight at the front of the building, and let's go to our mirror command. And so the first thing, we have to select the objects we want to mirror. So I'm going to double click on this, double click on this post, double click on that, double click on the tie beam, on the top plate, and this one too, and also our rafter lines. So we have everything selected, I believe, and now we're going to go down here in the dialog box to get into our mirror selection. And if I turn our origin on in the browser, I can go click right here on our center plane. Now, something interesting happened. I thought I clicked on this plane right here, but remember, this is a solid, this mass model is solid, but we're seeing through it because we set set it to transparent by using that air appearance. So Fusion thought that we're clicking on the outside of the building here. So there's two things we can do. One, we could hide our body, and now I can kill this mirror selection and go back to it, and now I can click on this plane, and you can see the preview here, what's getting mirrored properly. But if you wanted to leave your body visible, I'm going to kill the mirror selection and go back here. There's a way to drill down through a solid body. And what you do is you simply hold down the mouse button, and then this little dialog box pops up, and you can hover over these and make different selections. So basically, Fusion has figured out in 3D space where you clicked, what are all the objects that are there for you to make a selection from. And this YZ plane is the one that I want. And so that's an alternative way to make a selection in something that's obstructed by something else. Okay, so we have mirrored that. Let's take a look at the front view. We could also have clicked on this look at. Our origin is displayed here, so I'm going to hide that. Okay, so we have almost completed this drawing for the first bent. Sketch, I should have said. Okay, so we want to do a tie beam here is the last thing. So I'm going to go get a rectangle, same as these outer tie beams. I'm going to intersect on this face, this inner face of the post, and this interface of this post. And now I can type in 12 inches, that's the height of our beam, and we want the 10'8", and press enter. And did I press enter? Okay, there's enter. Now, if I double click on this rectangle, you can see I can move it vertically, but I can't move it any other direction. So I press D for dimension, click here, click on our floor. Oh, I'm getting an angular dimension here again. Okay, that's what we want. So I'm going to click, and now I can enter in a dimension, and that's supposed to be 13 feet to the top of this tie beam. So I'm going to type in 13 feet, enter, and everything is black here. The entire sketch is constrained. So I'm going to finish this sketch, and that's what we got. So that is our bent sketch. One last thing we should do is come over and name this sketch. So I'm going to click, wait a second, click a second time, and call this bent. Okay, so we've got 3 sketches. We can hide them all by hiding the folder, or we can hide them individually. And we also have our body here. So now we are prepared to start making timbers.